Hello, everyone. It's great to have you here. Today, we are going to be having another live demo, and I'm so glad that you are able to make it. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see some of the slides we have prepared, and then with that, we can kick things off. So let me go ahead to share my screen. Okay, so I think you should be able to see my screen. All right. So in today's demo, we are going to be building a Shopify Catalog Manager with Google Sheets. So we'll be integrating largely with the Shopify API, and we'll also show you how to use the Google Sheets integration that is available in AppSmith. So it's so great to have you here. I'm glad that we are all able to join in. Today is October 21, and we are having our live demo again today. So in case you are not familiar with AppSmith, or if this is the first time you are learning about AppSmith is a simple framework for you to build UIs quickly using a drag and drop interface, as you'll be seeing shortly. We're going to be having a demo so that we walk you through the process of building applications on AppSmith, specifically focusing on using the Shopify API. And you'd see how quickly you can get your apps up and running using AppSmith. You can quickly build apps in AppSmith using these three simple steps. The first is you connect to a database or an API. So say you have a MongoDB database set up, or Postgres database, or you have an API like Google Sheets or Shopify API that we would be using today. You can easily connect to these APIs and then start building your application. The second step is to bind data coming from the APIs into widgets. So you build the UI using the drag and drop interface. We have a number of pre-built widgets that you can choose from. We have the table widget, we have the list widget, we have the image widget, and so much more. So you can bring in data from your database that was gotten from step one and bind that into widgets that can be displayed in the application. And lastly, you can go on to publish and share your application so that everyone is able to see this. Okay, I just got a message that the screen sharing is not working. So let's see if this would fix it. Okay, I think that would do. All right, thank you for letting me know. Okay, so going back to the first slide, today's demo is going to be about building a Shopify Catalog Manager with Google Sheets, and it's nice to have you here. If you are not familiar with AppSmith, I already went through the three simple steps you can take to build applications on AppSmith. The first is to connect to your data source, which can be a database you already have set up. So say something like MongoDB, or it can also be an API, as we'll be doing for today's demo. We're going to be using the Shopify API. The second step is to connect data coming from the database or the API into UI widgets. We have a list of pre-built UI widgets, and I'm going to show you how to do that in today's demo. And lastly, after building the application to your satisfaction, you can go ahead to publish the application and share it. And you can also invite team members to come in to also work with you to build the application collaboratively. So what are we going to build today? We're going to be building the Shopify Catalog Manager, and I'll also use the opportunity to show you how to use the Google Sheets integration we have inside of AppSmith. So this is the application we are going to be building today. Let us do a quick tour of the application. So I have this opened up right here. And this is the application that we would be building today. So it's a Shopify Catalog Manager, and that would mean it allows us to manage products that we have in our Shopify store. So I have a Shopify store set up here, which is what you can see right here. We have the Shopify store here. And this dashboard we have built would be used to manage products that we have for the store. So we can click on the product to see more information about that product. And here we have all the details about that product. We can go into edit the details of that product by clicking the submit button, making the change, clicking on the submit button. And we can also delete a product. And interestingly, we can add new products by using the dashboard we have here. One cool feature that this application has is the ability to bulk import products into the Shopify store. So this is something that you can't do natively with the Shopify API, but because we have the power of AppSmith and Google Sheets and the Shopify API brought together in one place in the AppSmith platform, we are able to perform functions or features that are not natively supported. So here I have a Google Sheet that has some product data, and we can see that we have that same information showing up here on the application. So I can click on the sync button, and this would upload all the products specified here on the Google Sheet into my Shopify app, and would see that in the store right here when I reload. So I'm just going to reload this. And you can see that we have men's pants. We also have the women's pants, although that's not active. So that's why we can't see it. It's marked as being in the draft, so we can't see it until we go back to make that active. So this is largely what we would be building today. So as we go on to build this, what will you learn? So what can you expect to learn from following us along as we go on to build this application together? The first is that you would learn how to work with third-party APIs, and that includes creating authenticated APIs that have various authorization strategy. You also learn how to send up dynamic data into APIs as parameters, so that when the APIs are called with the parameters you send up, you get responses based on the parameters that they are called with. The second thing you also learn how to do by following along is you would see how to customize and style your applications. So we have a really nice looking application here with some card looking containers and really nice buttons. So I'll be showing you how to do all of that in this demo. And lastly, we'll see how to use the Google Sheets integration as we go along to build this application. So with that, we can get started. I'm just going to head over to the screen I have ready for building the application. So right here, I have a starter application on AppSmith. And what we have right here is some bare-bone widgets. We have a container widget here with a text that says Shopify Catalog Manager. And here we have a divider widget. And taking a look at the data sources section, we have a couple of APIs that I'll be coming back to explain why we have them here. And we'll also build more as we go along in the demo today. So the first thing I want us to do here is to connect to the Shopify API. So to do that, we need to go into data sources, create new, and here where it says authenticated API, I'm just going to click on that. So let's call this Shopify API. And there we have a name for it. So for the URL, I would need to supply my store URL. This will be the endpoint to my store API, because taking a look at this URL, we have my app name, and then we have the API version that we are working with. We also need to set some information for authentication. So for the authentication type, this is going to be basic auth, and I'm going to set my username right there. And I also want to set my password right there. And I can click on the save button. And here we have an authenticated API that talks to the Shopify endpoint. So the first thing I want to do is to create a new API using this Shopify authenticated data source in order to fetch products from my store. So to do that, I'm going to click on the new API button right here. And we can give this endpoint a name. So let's call this get product. All right. And it's going to be a get request using the Shopify data source we just configured. And this is going to be hitting the product.json resource. So let's test this by clicking on the run button. So I think this should be products.json. And here we have information about the products coming in as the response. So now we are getting all products from the store. We can now go into build widgets that will allow us to display the products we have coming in right here. So the first thing we need to do is to head back to the canvas, and let's drop in a container widget. So I'm just going to bring in a container widget. So let's expand this. All right, this looks good. Now we have a container widget on the canvas. I want to quickly do some styling of the container widget. So I'm going to set a border radius of 5 pixels and also give this some box shadow. And going back, you see that we have a nice shadow around the container, making it look like a card. So that's the kind of look we are going for in this application. And now I can go on to bring a list widget to display the data coming in from the get products query. So let's bring the list widget. So I'm going to drop this right there, and we can expand this. And here we have the list widget. So for the list widget, I'd like to update the name of this list widget to product list. And for the items, which is the data we want to be displayed in the list widget, we can easily grab that from the get products.data query. You can see that we have another key that we need to check in order to see the products, and that's the products. So I can do data.products. And here we have an array of all the products that are coming from the store. So we can go in to customize the items in the list in order to display those products. So the first thing I want to do here is to display the product title. So let's expand this. And for this text widget, we can say current item dot title. And here we have the project title, the product title. We can also display the status of the product. So let's do that using the second text widget we have here. So this is going to be current item status. And here we have both the product title and the product status showing up. Lastly, we can reuse the image widgets we have here to display the product image. So let's expand this, and let's go into say current item.image.src. And then we have the product image showing up. So just by bringing in widgets and connecting to a data source, the Shopify data source, we are able to build an application that gets data from the Shopify API and displays it on the canvas. And we can page through to check to see if everything looks good. And we can see that everything works nicely. Before moving away from this widget, we can bring in a text widget here to serve as a title for the list. So let's call this. So I'm going to call this product list, and we can go in to style this a bit by increasing the font size, and then we have product list. And lastly, I would want to drop a button that will allow us to create new products. So we'll come back to this to finish that up. Right now, we have the flow for displaying products. So the next thing we want to do is we want to be able to view a product and edit it. So for that, I would need a button. So let's just bring the button right here and place it in the list item. So let's call this button view. And what I want to do here is to style this button up a bit. So for the button variant, I'm just going to set this to tertiary. I want this to be rounded, and I want it to have some box shadow. And going back to the canvas, you can see that we have nice looking view buttons showing up here that does not drag your attention, but they are visible whenever you want to make use of them. So clicking on the view button would allow us to see more information about the product, and we are going to build a form that lets us to see that data and also to update that data. So to do that, we would need to bring in a form widget. So I'm just going to bring a form widget here. So that's a form. So I'm going to bring the form right here and expand it to take up this entire space. I think that looks okay. Okay, so I'm just going to reduce this a bit. Okay, that looks nice. And I'm going to bring the buttons to the bottom so that we have enough room to move other widgets into the form that would need for the updates and view flow. So for the form itself, I want to style this a bit. So I'm simply going to set a border radius of 5 pixels and give it some box shadow. And going back, you can see that we have some nice box shadow around the form widget. All right. So now let's start displaying information about the selected product from the list. So right here, we have this jacket selected. The first thing we want to do here is to show the ID of the product that we are editing. So we can use the text widget we have here. I'm just going to reuse this, put a hash sign, and to access the ID of the item selected on the list, remember that we updated the name of this list to product list. So what we need to do here is just to access that list and view the item that has been selected. So this is going to be product list dot selected item dot ID, and then we have the ID showing up. So let's edit this a bit so that it looks nice. I'm just going to expand this, and that's the ID of the product selected. So going to select this t-shirt we have right here. You can see that that ID has been updated, and this will apply to every other widget that we'll be bringing within this form. So the next widget we need is a text widget, and we want to use this to build an input for the title. So let's call this title. And we can go in to bring a text input, to bring in an input widget to display this. So let's bring in input. So we have the input widget right here. And I'm going to expand this. For the widget name, so I'm going to update this from the default input one to update product title. And for the default text, we want that to be coming from the item selected on the product list. So let's do product list dot selected item dot title. Because I'll need this a couple of times, so I'm just going to copy this binding. So this would be selected item dot title. And then we have the title of the products selected here, also showing up right there. We need another input widget, and this is no, we would need another input, but not an input widget. So we would need a rich text editor. So let's bring in a rich text editor right here. And we can expand this. Let's similarly bring in a text widget to serve as the label. All right, so we have a text widget here. I think that's too close, so I'm going to bring this a bit down so that we have some space between the entries. So this is going to be for the body. So let's call that body. And we want the rich text editor to display the body HTML of the product selected. So let's just call this update products body HTML. And for the default text, we can get that from the selected item on the list, and this is going to be body HTML as you guessed. And here we can see the description of the product in HTML form displayed properly within the rich text editor. The next thing we want to do is to display the product type, and this is going to be a drop down, but I'll need a text widget in order to display this properly. So I'm just going to bring in the text widget. Let us call this product type. And we can bring in a select widget here to display the product type. So let's expand this. For the widget name, we're going to update this to update product type. All right. And similarly for the default option, this is going to be coming from the product type of the item selected on this. So this is going to be product list dot selected item dot product type, and we need to supply some options because right here what we have only the default options showing here, so we need to select and put in some custom options. For the options I have here, we have an option for men's clothing, we have another option for women's clothing, we have one more for children's clothing, and these are all the options we have here. So taking a look at this t-shirt we have here, we can see that the product type of this t-shirt falls under the women's clothing category. So we can go into use that. And similarly, we want to display the status. So we would need a text widget. I'm just going to bring this right here. And let's call this status. So this will let us know if the product is kind of like published so that it shows up on the storefront, or if it is in a draft state. So let's bring in a select widget to similarly display this. So I'm going to put this right here and expand this. All right. So for the widget itself, let's call this update status. And for the default option, this is going to be product list dot status. And we also need to put in some options. We only have two options in this case. We have the active option and we also have the draft option. And those are the two options we have available for this state. All right. Lastly, we need to bring two input widgets for updating the price and the quantity of the products. So I'm just going to bring the text widgets here. So let's call this price. And we can bring in an input widget to display the current price of the item selected. So for the input widget, we're going to update the name of the widget to update product price. And for the default text, this is going to come in from the product list.selected item.variants, which is an array. We want to get just the first item here. And we have dot price. And then we can see the price showing up. Since price is in numbers, we can set the input type to be of type number. So that would ensure that only valid numbers can be entered into this input. And similarly, let's do the same for the quantity. So this is going to be quantity. And we can bring in a text widget, an input widget rather, to display the value. So let's bring this here. So I'm going to call this update product quantity. Okay, set this to number. And for the default text, this is going to be coming from variant.inventory quantity. And then we have that number showing up. So taking a look at the form we have right here, we have built a form that allows us to view more information about the product selected. So going to select this backpack, for example, you can see that we have everything here updated to display the data of the item selected from the list. So right now, this form only allows us to view data, but we can't update data. So let's build in functionalities that would allow us to update data shown in the form. All right, so the first thing we want to do here is to update the button here, the one called reset, to actually perform a delete when it is clicked on. So before going in to customize the button, let's create a query that allows us to perform a delete action. So let's go back to data sources. We have our Shopify API data source. I'm just going to create a new API, and let's call this delete product. And this is going to be a delete request to /products / the product ID. And for the product ID, we can grab that from the product list. So this is going to be product list.selected_item.id. And lastly, we need to add .json, and that would hit the delete endpoint. So we can go back to hook this up to the button here. So for the button, we want to update the text or the label to say delete. And we can similarly style this. So let's give this a color of red. We can give this a button variant of secondary, make this rounded, give it some box shadow, and I think that looks nice. Then when it is clicked on, what we want to do is to go to execute the delete query we just configured. So we want this to call the delete product query. And when that is successful, we want to call the get product query so that we have the data in the application refreshed to reflect the item that has been removed. So I'm just going to go to delete one of these items. So we have one of these here. So I'm clicking on view, and this is for women's pants 4. So I'm just going to delete this. And you can see that that has been removed from the list. So we have the delete button working flawlessly. The next thing we want to do is to configure a flow that lets us to update a product. And for this, we need to build multiple APIs. So we would need to have about 3 APIs in order to update a product. And this is because the Shopify API has resources distributed. I think that's the kind of architecture they wanted to go for. So it makes it easy to reuse those resources in other places without needing to update everything else. So the first resource we need to hit is the one that lets us to update the title, body, and the title, body, product type, and status. So let's go back to the Shopify API. Let's create a new endpoint. And this is going to be hitting the product routes, uh, the product ID.json. So this is going to be products / product ID.json. So let's call this update product. And this is going to be a put request. So let's say this is a put request to this endpoint, which is products, then the product ID, similar to what we did for the delete flow.json. And since this is a put request, we need to send up some payload. So we have the payload here. All right, this looks good. So we're sending up the title, and for the value of the title, we are picking that from the form input. So remember, we have a title input called update product, which is up or up title. So that is the input right here, and we are reading the text value from that widget. And taking a look at the evaluated value, you can see that we have the correct value being picked up by the form. Same thing goes for the body HTML, the product type, and also the status. We are all picking these values from the widgets within the form. All right, this looks good. We also want to make another endpoint to update the price. So we cannot use the previous API endpoints to update the price. We have to call a different API. So this was what I was trying to explain earlier. And for this, we can update the name of this endpoint to be update price. So this is going to be a put request, and it's going to be hitting a different resource. So it's hitting the variant resource, and we need to pass the variant ID, and then that will be followed by .json. So we have variant ID.json. And for the body, we can pass up the price for the product we want to be updated. So this is going to be the price, and this is being picked up from the price input. You can see that in the evaluated value window, we have that currently showing. Lastly, we want to update the quantity, and for that, we need a different API to do that. So let's configure the last API we would be needing for the update flow. So let's call this update inventory. So let's go back to call this update inventory. And this is going to be a post request. So this is a post request. Let's set this to post. And it's going to be a post request to /inventory levels /adjust.json. And we would need to send up some payload. So let's do that. For the payload, I am going to explain this in a bit. So the first key we have here is for the location ID. And that's for the store I want this update to be made to. So this is a static value, and it's not going to change. This is just for my store ID. Then the next thing we want to send up is the inventory ID, and we can pick that from the product selected from the list widget. So that's product list.selected item.variant.inventory item ID. And lastly, we want to send an update for the quantity. So the way the Shopify API works is that you can only add to what you currently have. So if you have 5 items and you call this API passing 5, it's not going to set your total number of quantity to be 5. Instead, it will add 5, which is incoming, to the 5 already existing, and you have 10. So it works by making additions. So if you want to make a reduction in the number of quantities that are available in the store, you have to add a negative number, and that would make the reduction. So this code snippet we have here figures out if we want to make an addition or a reduction, such that if the user enters 5 items into the input we have on the form, and we have 10 items in the store, this code right here is just going to return in -5, and that will perform the subtraction that will be required to reduce the items in the store to 5. So that's what this snippet does. It figures out if we are performing an addition or a subtraction. All right, so that was a lot of APIs we had to do. We had to configure about 3 of them to make this work. So let's go to the update button or the submit button here to connect all of these APIs to this button. So we can call this update. And let's style this a bit as well. So I'm just going to make this rounded, and I'm going to add some box shadow to it. And then we have a nice looking button. When this is clicked on, I'm just going to enable the JavaScript mode. When this is clicked on, we want to go and call all of those APIs in steps. So we want to call the update product API first. And when that's successful, we want to call the update price API. And when that's successful, we want to go on to call the update inventory API, and then we would be done. That would be all. That's all we would need to do. So let's call the update product query. So this will be update product.run. And then when this is successful, we want to go to call the update price. So this is going to be update price.run. When that is successful, we want to go in to call the update inventory.run. And largely that's all we need to do. But it's going to be nice for us to have the most updated data in the app. So we need to perform a refresh. And for that, we will need to call the get products query. So this is going to be get product.run. And that's all we need to do. But the problem is the Shopify API is a bit slow. So if we make all of these updates and then try to perform a refresh, the data we're going to be getting back from the API is going to be the old or previous data. So we need to perform multiple refresh to make sure that we have the most updated data coming in. So I'm just going to do another refresh after this is successful. So this is, again, going to be get products.run. And we will need to do this one more time just to be sure. So this will be, again, get products.run. And there we should have everything set. So now we have the jackets right here. Let's try to update the quantity from 10 to 5. So I'm going to click on the update button. And this should call the update product query, the price, the inventory query, and perform 3 refresh, as we can see. And there we have the updates made. Be rest assured that we have this quantity updated. Like I mentioned earlier, the Shopify API is a bit slow. So on reloading this application, you should see that we have the correct data showing up. So I'm just going to select this jacket one more time. And you can see that in the quantity input, we have 5 showing up. So that's because the Shopify API is a bit slow. All right, so we have almost everything ready for the first part of the application. The last thing we need to do here is to configure the submit button here. So let's update this to add. And we are similarly going to style this a bit. So I need to set the button variant to secondary, make this rounded, and give it some box shadow. And that looks nice. And when this is clicked on, what we want to do is to open up a modal that allows users to add a new product. So let's go to open a modal. And I already have a modal configured for this, and that's the new product modal. So clicking on this, clicking on the button is going to open the new product modal, and we can go into fill in details for the new product we want to add. It's very similar to what we did for the update flow here. In fact, you can see that the form is exactly the same aside of the image field we have right here. And for the queries we need to run, we are running all the queries marked as new here. So we are running the new inventory query, we're running the new image query, we're running the new product query, the new price query, and the new track inventory query, just to be able to save a new product. So this is what I was talking about earlier, saying that Shopify has resources spread across different parts of their API endpoints. So that's it for the update flow. The last thing we want to do here is to create the bulk import flow. So right now we're done with the home page. Taking a look at the pages, we have the home page, which has been completely built. We are able to update product data and also to add new products. Now we want to create a flow that would allow us to bulk import products from Google Sheets. So I mentioned earlier I have this Google Sheets data prepared with 2 products. So we want to configure a flow that will let us import all of this at once using AppSmith. And we can easily do that by integrating with the Google Sheets API. So let's go to do that. We have the data sources section. So I'm just going to click on that, click on create new, and here we have Google Sheets. So I'm going to select that. Let's call this G Sheets. All right. And for the scope, we may not need to write anything to the sheet, but I'm just going to leave this as read and write. And let's go ahead to authorize this integration. So select my account, give it the necessary permission. And then we have the Google Sheets integration authorized. So I can use this to create a new API to fetch the sheets we have in the spreadsheet we have right here. So I'm just going to go back to click on new API. And we can call this get products from sheets. That's a really long name, but I think that's very descriptive. So for the method, we want to fetch data from the Google Sheets. For the spreadsheet URL, I'm just going to copy this. And now we can go back to paste this right here. And the default sheet is sheet 1, which is the sheet I have right here. So we have sheet 1 right here. And I can click on the run button to see if this works. And it does. We have the sheet data coming back from the Google Sheets integration. Now that we have this data coming back, we can go to display this data. And similarly, I would need to drop a container widget so that we can style this up a bit. So let's bring in a container widget. All right, this looks good. I would need to set a border radius of 5 pixels and make it, give it some box shadow. And here we have a nice container here with some box shadow. Next thing I want to do is to display information coming from the Google Sheets query. So I'll need a table widget for this. I'm just going to drop this right here and expand this so that it takes up the entire space. So let's expand this. All right, there we have the table. And to actually display the data, I would need to connect the data coming from the get products from sheets query. So this is get products from sheets.data. And here we have all of the data showing up. But you notice that we have an image column that has URLs to the images shown on the Google Sheets. We can actually display that image inside of the table. So let's go to edit the image column here. So clicking on the gear icon, I can set the column type to image. Yeah, that's image. And here we can see a preview of the image coming from Google Sheets. And this looks nice. So let's bring in a text widget here. We can call this products from G Sheets. All right, so let's style this a bit. Okay, that looks good. And lastly, we want to be able to sync this data with the Shopify API. We also want to perform a manual refresh such that if an update is made to this sheet, we want to click on a button that would draw in updated data from that sheet and display it in the application. So let's bring in 2 buttons to both do the manual refresh and to do the syncing of the data to Shopify. So let's bring in a button here. And I need to reduce this a bit. We would need 1 more button. So I'm going to reduce this a bit. All right, and bring this right here. So for the first button, this is going to be our refresh button. So let's call this refresh. And we want to also style this a bit. So I'm going to set this to secondary, make this rounded, give it some box shadow, and then we have the refresh button. But when it is clicked on, what I just want to do is to call the get products from sheets query again. So let's go to execute a query, and we have the get products from sheets query. And I think that looks good. So clicking on the refresh button is just going to check if there are any changes in the Google Sheets and then display that data in the table. Then the second button we have here is the sync button. And this is the button that would allow us to take all of this data we have coming in from Google Sheets and store them in Shopify. So we have the submit button right here. We already have a couple of queries pre-written to make this work. So we have similar queries as you saw in the homepage. We have a query to create a new product, a query to create a new inventory, a query to create a new price, a query to create a new image, and a query to track that product that has been created. So what we're going to be doing in the submit button here, which we're going to shortly rename to sync, is that when it is clicked on, we're going to call all of these queries for each of the items coming from Google Sheets so that we go to add them one by one. All right, so let's do that. So for the submit button, so let's call this sync. All right, and let's start this a bit similarly. So I'm going to set the border radius and make it to have some box shadow. Then when this is clicked on, we want to go into JavaScript mode. And I have this massive code that does the logic I just explained earlier. So what this is doing is that it is looping through all the products gotten from the get product from Google Sheets data. And it is calling all of these queries we just talked about here. So it's calling the get the new product query. And when that's successful, it goes to call the new image query. Then it calls the new price query. Then it calls the track inventory query. Then it goes in and calls the new inventory query. And after that's successful, we see a message saying that that particular item has been added to the Shopify store. So let's give this a try. We have two items here right now. So I'm just going to click on the sync button to see if that works. And it's going to call all of those queries to add the items. And you can see that we have the two items specified here added into the store. And we can go back to the homepage to see that they've both been added. I think we already have previous duplicates, so it might be a little bit difficult. We have the women's pants train up here, and we have other variants train up right here. And that shows that that query works fine. So let's go into mark all of this as active because right now we have them in the draft. So I'm just going to click on update. All right, so similarly, I'm going to also mark this as active. Do we have anything that is not active? Okay, this is not active, so let's also make this active. All right, that looks good. So heading back to the store, so let's head back to my store, reload this. We should see that we have a couple of products now added to the store. Yeah, so we have all of these products added to the store and users can go in to get any one of these that is appealing to them. So we've been able to build the application to manage products and also to perform bulk imports on AppSmith by connecting with the Shopify API and also integrating with Google Sheets. And I think this was pretty easy because we did this in about 30 minutes time. So that was really fast. So heading back to the studio, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right. Okay, I think I should share my screen. All right, so we've completed doing the demo and it's time for some question and answer. I'll be looking at the chat right now to see if you have any questions so that we can take those questions that you may have. Okay, so we have a question here. So I'm just going to take that. So someone is asking on the chat if there's a way to reorder elements shown on the table widget by drag and drop. If I understand you, you mean is there a way to reorder the way the product is shown up right here? By drag and drop, no. But you can build filters in order to change the way you want this product to be displayed. So if you can use other widgets to build filters, or you can use the built-in filters in the table widget. So you can choose to sort this by quantity by clicking on the quantity, for example, and you see that we have the lower quantity showing up before the higher quantity, and that's is one way you can do this right now. But by doing it using drag and drop, right now you can't do this. Okay, you're also asking, is there a way to increase the size of the JS editor? Right now, no. So we have a fixed property size for the JS editor here, which is really small, but we are working on a new JS objects feature. Taking a look at my screen, you should be able to see this. This is JS objects. So I can go in to create a new JS object and write some very long code, and we have the opportunity to do that in a very convenient space. So this gives all the space you will need, and this is going to be released pretty soon. So I think this would address the issue of writing JS within the small property pane. Do we have any other questions coming in? Okay. So I'm just going to hold on a bit for any other questions you may have. All right. So that seems like that's all the questions we have for today. So thank you so much for coming to today's demo. It was nice having you around, and I'm going to see you in the next demo we will be having. So thank you so much for coming today.